On the 10th of September, the way you experience Dune Awakening is going to change forever. And to get you prepared, I've painstakingly gone through and tested nearly all the major changes in order for you to have the most up-to-date knowledge right from the get-go. And I kid you not, there have been some game-changing updates, from the introduction of 5 new complete armor sets, a ton of new uniques, weapons, armors that can be found in the deep desert. We even get a sneak peek into the Lost Harvest DLC's points of interest, vehicle, which thankfully is far superior to the Sandbike. We're going to do some comparisons. There's a complete rework to aerial combat, massive changes to vehicle storage, and just so many good quality of life changes. For instance, hot swapping in the buggy, naming vehicles and storage containers for organization, new dynamic events, bug fixes, a plethora of quality of life features, new UI. There is so much to go through. Let's get down to business. So the new DLC is coming, and we can actually get our first look at the point of interest, the location, which is going to be within Haga Basin. It sits slightly west from Haga Basin south, and we can see that it's a crash harvester, and all the missions are going to be revolving around going inside. There are a few NPCs you'll be able to talk to, and I believe this opens up to a much larger area, as you can now drive from Haga Basin South to this island all the way to Sheol. I believe we'll start the DLC by getting a quest on a mission board, or it will just be automatic new mission from the get-go in our journey. But a few other things we can check out about the DLC. We can look at the new Treadwheel vehicle in a lot of detail. What's fantastic about the new vehicle, it does appear to be far superior than the Sandbike. So the first entry for the Treadwheel is a Mark IV aluminum, so tier 4. There's also one for tier 5 and tier 6. It has 9 pieces in total, which includes 4 utility parts, which are the passenger, scanner, boost, and inventory. Noting that the inventory in the aluminum tier, pretty much the exact same as the Mark II inventory for the Sandbike. There's also uniques for the engine and booster in the various tiers. But let's do a quick comparison between the tier 6 Treadwheel and the Sandbike, because this is where things get very interesting. We have the Sandbike Mk6 in green, yellow we have the Treadwheel. Treadwheel has the acceleration of a very fast. No other ground vehicle has that as a base. Keep in mind that there is a unique for both the Sandbike and the Treadwheel, so this will be expanded further. The Treadwheel has a slightly slower top speed, but its acceleration is off the charts, so it's going to be very quick to get going. The power supply stats are exactly the same. What is interesting is the armor. It is much tougher than the Sandbike, with the armor for each wheel being 2,250. The grip is tiny at 18.2 in comparison to 40, which means it's going to be able to probably turn on a dime. And the most important part that sets it above all other ground vehicles is the vibration at 13.5. This is the lowest vibration for any ground vehicle, meaning this is going to be excellent for traversing deep desert, potentially making it a very difficult target to hit from an ornithopter, but I doubt it'll be used all that much, but you could definitely try. And then everything else is pretty much the same. When it comes to the component cost, Sandbike Mk6 in green, Treadwheel in yellow, with red highlighting where the difference is on crafting cost. Main takeaway here is that the Treadwheel will cost more than the Sandbike on spice, plastanium, and all the resources highlighted red. It's not a significant increase, but it is more. To me, when I look at this, I think there's substantial benefits for using the Treadwheel over the Sandbike, particularly the vibrations, insane acceleration, and I bet it's going to be a lot of fun to drive. Has increased armor, a slightly higher cost. But let me know what you think in the comments. This is far more unique than I expected. I was thinking an exact copy of the Sandbike. A huge shout out to today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Let's be real, the Aussie internet is a little bit of a letdown. I can't even watch my all-time favorite show, The Office. But with Surfshark, I just switch my location to the US, refresh Netflix, and boom, The Office is back, and it still cracks me up every bloody episode. Honestly, that alone makes Surfshark worth it. But it's not just about streaming. Surfshark gives me full control over the privacy and security online. Everything I do is encrypted. No ads, no trackers, and no weird ISAP snooping. Just me, Jim and Pam, and total peace of Michael. And if anything goes wrong, their 24/7 live chat and email support actually responds fast, proper helpful. You can also use one account across unlimited devices, and there is a 30-day money-back guarantee. So you've got nothing to lose. Go to surfshark.com/sinkiller or use code SINKILLER at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. in the Lost Harvest DLC, they mentioned there's expanded Imperial testing stations. So for instance, one of them is located in the Imperial testing station number 29. So how does it work? Well, the Imperial testing stations will add a whole new sort of like built-on section to the existing Imperial station. So you'll come to the loot room, then you'll have to look around. In testing station 29's case, we have to open the secret room, and then you'll note that they've actually added this little door here. And this is where we go to start the Imperial testing station, the expanded versions. Now, I believe you will not be able to access this without the DLC because it will sort of have a check. There's a door you have to pass through. I'll just show you as we run down this deep winding area. And here we are. So you'd run down to here and then you'd be able to access what should be quite a massive extension. And the most interesting aspect to all of this is that there's actually 2 different doors. Now, I'm not sure if this is just a placeholder, but as you can see, these 2 things are going to take you somewhere. At least that's how we understand it right now. Now, I believe I found one in the Haga Rift. I think there's one in Uadam, and I think the third might be testing station 117 or 76. Can't remember. But there you have it. That's how you'll find the 3 new expanded testing stations. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you the base degradation, building pieces, armor, skins, and all that stuff yet. But that's pretty much the most in-depth knowledge we have about the DLC. Let's keep moving. So perhaps one of the most notable changes, which will pretty much halve all the amount of trips and time wasting we do for logistics within the deep desert, and that is the big change to the storage for the Assault Ornithopter. They've doubled it. It now has a volume of 2,000, which is a huge help, particularly once this sits on top of a storage container. But the implications for this are huge. And just another example, here is some carbon and some iron ore, and just look at how much we can take now. It really is a big change. You'll definitely notice this one. Oh, this is a sweet, sweet change for solo players. Now, for the first time, we have hotkeys or hot swapping between the cutter array and all the various seats. We hit F2, boom, we're able to mine. We can go F1 straight into the driver's seat, and then F2 again, hit it, and this feels very smooth. And there are a few little bugs around it, but from my testing, it has been very nice, and this is such a welcome change. Tell you what, doing it the old way was very cumbersome and crazy. Now we can hit F1 to driver's seats, F2 for laser cutter, F3 for passenger 1, and it goes on all the way until probably F6, F7 for the carrier. It's worth noting this change has overwritten removing the HUD while you're in the vehicle, so you won't be able to hide the HUD while in the vehicle. You have to get out of the vehicle, hit F6, then go into the vehicle to hide the HUD. Just in case you're trying to get screenshots, that's the new way we got to do it. The version of the test environment at the moment does not include hotkeys for us to be able to change this at the front end. So how it is how it will stay right now. Later on, I'm sure we'll be able to change these keys. If Funcom, if you are watching, please make sure down the track we can assign all the various buttons and keys to a mouse button, particularly MMO mouses. Be very handy because at the moment it doesn't work when you're in vehicles for many of the different keys. To me, I didn't really notice any kind of cooldown between switching. It is pretty much just this instantaneous, very smooth switch over. So we finally got it, and it's great to see. Quick note that they've changed the vehicle temperature bar. It's now going to show the heat value immediately upon entering a vehicle. So as an example, I'm just going to overheat this cutter array, and we're just about to hit it. And if we exit the vehicle now, and then we go jump straight back into the cutter array, we will get the temperature, finally having the temperature displayed correctly. Whereas before, you would slowly see the temperature rise from 0 and finally catch up to its true heat value. This impacts all vehicles. Overheating is now displayed correctly. Another really good change is that they've definitely enhanced and improved how collision works between all the various vehicles. That crazy bounce back has sort of been replaced with a much more realistic sort of experience, and you don't sort of get completely catapulted off vehicles anymore. But it is still sometimes a significant bounce back. But overall, I've noticed quite a different relationship between collisions between the various vehicles. Something to note, it also appears that the collision between the carrier and ground vehicles should cause less of a pop all the time. I definitely experienced many problems where you'd be dropping the harvester and the harvester would shoot off. It appears that this doesn't happen as often. It still can happen, but they've definitely reduced it. So one of the other nice features that's been added is the use of auto walk or auto accelerate. Now for my testing, this will work in your ground vehicles. Obviously just normal walking, running, you can now hit one button and it's going to auto run. And the good thing is it also works with your ornithopter while it's in dragonfly mode. However, obviously in vulture mode, it's just going to be doing the usual gliding. So you will have to be in dragonfly mode, then hit the button and then it will propel you forward for as long as you need. Also open your map. It will stop your character. However, as soon as you unclick the map, your character will continue to run. So it is handy. You can hit the journal. You'll open the journal. You can click around, look at a few things. Just hit the journal button again or map button, exit out, and your character will keep running. It would be really handy if we could keep the running activated while we look at the map. However, what is handy, if you are using a vehicle and you want to look at your map, your vehicle will continue to move, go to max acceleration, particularly great for ground vehicles. And the same will apply when you're in your ornithopter. You'll be able to hit the map. It's going to continue to propel your ornithopter forward. Now, a big one for a lot of players, and that is going to be the storage management renaming functionality of all the various chests and containers. So for the chests, this is the big one. A lot of people have been asking for this. So now we can go and name our containers, but we have to abide by some somewhat strict naming conventions. Not super sure what they mean by reserved words. Let me know what you think in the comments, what they mean by that. Looks like you can rename them to some funny names still, but profanity is still filtered out. Here we will rename it to Sin Weapon. We hit OK. Now you can see that the UI is updated with the name. This is super freaking helpful. I know a lot of people will be very happy with this change. But in any case, a very cool new addition. Just going back to the renaming, it appears that we can rename pretty much any of the structures now within the base. So say the medium ore refiner, if you want it to be identified as belonging to someone, you could do that for all your production buildings. So that in itself is also a very nice touch. And from my testing, it does appear that every single structure type and building can now have its own name. Very good to see. And now, just as importantly, to make it very easy to identify vehicles, we can go to Manage Vehicle, where it says the vehicle name. We can now hit this button and edit the freaking name. So now in a guild, when you have hundreds of these things lying around, you'll now be able to rename them following the exact same validations as containers. So ensure you abide by these rules. When you type something in, give it a second, then you can hit confirm. And we now have a vehicle renamed. So for instance, when we go to storage, you would hope to see the vehicle name. Currently this is bugged, but you would technically see Sin here, which will make it so much more efficient and easier to identify what vehicle you're looking for to store items and move things in and out. You'd click on Sin and then drop stuff in. Currently bugged, but this will be fixed soon. At least we hope. Now, the unfortunate thing is we don't have the names appearing above the vehicles just yet. That may be coming, but that would be the next really handy feature that is desperately needed, because at the moment, not seeing the name is going to make it difficult to identify as well. We really need to be able to see that text above vehicles. I will raise it, see what they say. Let's check out the brand new Archetype Armor Sets. What they are, how to get them, and what makes them so special. And importantly, where they sort of stand within the power hierarchy of Dune Awakening. So what are the Archetype Armor Sets? These are the unique armor sets tied to the specific class. So Bene Gesserit, Mentat, Planetologist, Soulmaster, and Trooper. They all look extremely different and very similar to the images that you see within your skill tree. And they are much more than just fancy skins or cosmetics. Once you've unlocked, they offer powerful gameplay impacts and perks, which is unique to these armor sets alone. I haven't seen any other armor sets that offer ability cooldowns, but we'll come back to that. So to unlock them, we have to 100% complete the mentor quest lines. So the quest line to unlock the full complete skill tree, the Bene Gesserit, Mentat, etc. At the end, on the very last mission, you'll see that they've added the armor set as a reward. So if you haven't completed these quest lines for the various classes, you'll have to do so in order to access these and be able to craft them from Garment Fabricator, which you can craft as much as you want. It's basically like unlocking a unique, but you have it permanently there to craft at your will. Now, if you've already completed all of these quest lines, I believe you should be able to go to your journey and potentially click on the rewards for these previously completed quest lines and get them automatically that way. Or you will just have to go and craft them yourself via the Garment Fabricator. Not 100% certain on how that will work yet, but that's my guess. Cool thing is though, if you're in a guild and you haven't completed all these quest lines, you can still wear them If another guild member gives them to you, you'll be able to buy them on the market. You just won't be able to craft them from the fabricator yourself until you've completed the quest lines for the various classes. So once you've unlocked them, having these available in the garment fabricator means on weeks where you have full loot DD, these could be very handy armor pieces to wear, as these sit kind of like a tier 5.5 in the scale of all the armor sets across the light and heavy. There's no steel suits, but you have the light armor archetypes, which are your Bene Gesserit, Mentat, Planetologist, and Swordmaster. It's roughly about 4 to 7% below your tier 6 Chome light armor. I'll throw up some examples and comparisons of the stats so you can see them clearly as we continue to talk about it. The Trooper will equal your heavy armor. It's very closely aligned with your Chome tier 6 heavy. And the thing that really sets these armor pieces apart is that each of these pieces offer a bonus to your class ability cooldown, offering generally 1 to 2% depending on the piece. These will stack, roughly giving you a 7% total ability cooldown when you wear the full set. So it is giving you sort of like a set bonus. And that really makes these archetype armors truly unique. Now, just to give you an example of what a 7% ability cooldown would sort of represent, just as an example, Bindu Sprint at base cooldown at level 1 of 20 seconds. With the full Bene Gesserit Archetype Armor Set, you will get a reduction of 7% on that, so it will turn out to be 18.6 second cooldown. But generally, you're basically shaving anywhere from 1.4 to 2.4 seconds off each ability cooldown across all that class skill. In this example, the Bene Gesserit, which can be a substantial difference in beating someone to use a skill in combat. It's going to be very interesting to see how this sort of works and fits into the deep desert. I do believe these will certainly be very useful and hold their own quite well. So the bottom line is these aren't just fancy fashion pieces. However, we can use the transmog system and switch between the various different armors. You'll be able to customize these as well with all the various different swashes from the Lansrad, making some of these look truly unique. Let me know what you think and which ones are your favorite. Something to look forward to for this patch for sure. You'll now be able to collect certain contracts and new contracts from within Arrakis and Harko Village. So there's roughly about 6 new contracts between Arrakis and Harko. All the quests will be isolated between these social hubs. It is a very good way to get some quick XP and Solari, as well as you won't have to travel to Haga Basin for any of these quests. But you can expect voiced NPCs, a little bit of problem solving, nothing too crazy. Probably takes maybe couple hours, if that, and you can sort of expect the main quest has been reported to be about 4 to 8 hours. You'll now be able to customize your character. Now in Arrakis, you'll be able to talk to Dr. Shafat, which you pick up this mission from the mission board that we saw earlier, and it is across from the Lansrad, and they've opened up this room that you'd go up, which was closed before. But the easiest way to tell is just if you see this hologram here, identifying that this is where we go to get our character customized. And they've created this whole new, quite well detailed room where we can now go and talk to Dr. Shafat. And it's going to cost 5,000 Solaris to alter our appearance. So barely anything. Good thing to note is you won't get charged for that 5,000 Solari unless you actually commit to a change. So you can go in there, muck around, and if you don't like it, you can just escape. You won't be charged for it. I think you can even go and save a character design without being charged. So a lot of flexibility here, very cheap. I think that's a good way to do it. But if we go alter our appearance, it does appear to be deducted out of our bank account. So make sure you have the money in the Chome bank account. And while we're here, we can check out some of the new tattoos. This one's pretty funky. It has all kinds of weirdness on it. And then we have a flower piece. And I'm pretty sure most of these were already existing. The only 2 we have that are new are these 2, at least on the face. For the body tattoo, we have 4 new ones as well. We have the flower, the sleeve. This one's pretty mad. We got a bat. Funny though, it does only zoom into the head. We can't zoom into the shoulder there. And then finally, we have another sort of Fremen tattoo of Shai Halud. So pretty neat. Some cool tattoos there. There's also 4 new hairstyles, I believe. We have the, whatever the hell that is. We have this one, we have this, and this. They look all very feminine to me, but whatever. Now we can also go to the next level and completely change presets if we wanted to. Additionally, we can also import and export our character. So that's pretty neat. So I imagine we would be able to then use this to import how our character looks into another server or siege. So very nice to have that functionality, allowing us to take how our character looks between servers. But there you go. We've made some changes to our character. We're going to go finish and we confirm, and you can see it's going to deduct 5,000 from our bank account. And there you have it. If you're wondering where the character customization NPC is, there will be a mission quest for it, so you can't really get it wrong, but it's just at the back of Harco. You just head to where the Swordmaster is in the back corner. You'll notice the sign of the two faces and another excellent, very detailed room with some crazy experiments and this little short guy with the big head. The dynamic encounters. These are going to be new little mini events that will happen dynamically on the map. There seems to be somewhere between 5 to 8 new dynamic encounters. And let me give you a few examples of what to expect. We have a couple different merchants that will be selling raw ore all the way up to tier 5 ore can be found, only bought in small quantities, unfortunately, but it does add a very interesting element for new players running through the game where you will be able to get access to materials way earlier than you ever imagined. But again, the marketplace was there. The merchants will also offer a quest that you can perform. These are generally assassination quests, sending you off to kill, say, slavers or one of the other factions within Haga Basin. The best merchant I saw was the one selling components at massively discounted prices. Basically, you'd be hunting around trying to find this merchant. You can get insulated fabric for 20 Solari. Can you believe that? As well as many other great components for much cheaper. Many of the other dynamic encounters will put you on assassination missions where you have to kill a boss located at one of the points of interest. One will have you place a totem in far out locations, high up, all over the shop. The good thing is these give reasonably good XP, generally sitting at 150 to 4,000 Solari takeaway. So these are nice additions and would have quite a big impact in the early game, hopefully, which will be built upon as more dynamic encounters are added and hopefully more fleshed out NPC interactions, whether they have the ability to drive vehicles, move around in convoys. There could be some excellent larger scale dynamic encounters, but again, we can build anywhere, so it is difficult to manage something like that. So the main takeaway is these dynamic encounters can pop up in about 4 of the various different regions. They cycle through all the various different dynamic encounters. You'll be able to do these over and over again. You won't be able to stack the same kind of dynamic event. You can only do one type of dynamic event at a time. You can have multiple different open contracts for the dynamic events. So ultimately, this is kind of giving us unlimited replayability within Haga Basin. You can farm these for XP and Solari quite nicely. So they've done a lot of rework around the missile launcher, and they've introduced the Adept missile launcher. This is the duraluminum tier. You can see what it cost here, so not too crazy. You'll still have your Regis missile launcher. They've also added missiles to the weapons fabricator. So the lock-on range, as you can see as this gets in, it is pretty much 150. It sort of feels like a little bit under. Now, one thing I can confirm is that after doing some testing, I have a very bad ping, and maybe that's the reason, but where I'm firing and then from the other person's perspective, what's happening are two complete different stories. So for instance, I'll fire, it looks like my rocket will go through the wings, but then on the other screen, you can see the impact. So there still seems to be a lot of work done on how the desync and rocket combat will be, but at least that rocket that hit is dealing damage directly to individual parts of your vehicles now. And this goes into one of the big changes where they have stated that the rocket should now correctly deal damage to the vehicle modules they hit. And it's worth noting the only real difference between the tier 6 launcher versus the tier 5 is only the damage. Now, the other thing that they've changed is for rockets, missiles, they are going to explode now at the end of their range. So they will no longer just continually going on forever. They will all explode at their peak range. So this could have interesting impacts. You could almost try anticipate where they might be. Obviously, this would be very tricky, but it is going to be more possible now. But it is worth noting, it is quite a long range for that explosion to take place. So something to consider. It is a little bit of a different mechanic. This will be particularly noticeable for Ornithopter combat. So we'll move on to their changes. Just like the rocket launches, now your missile launcher on the Ornithopter, when it fires, it will also at the end of its life explode. Now its range is so much further, and you can tell right now how different the trajectory is. The missile right now is way, way faster and actually has a really cool new effects as well. Now this is also meant to explode at the end of its life. It was my understanding. We'll see if that's the case. From my testing in this build, the rockets from Ornithopters aren't actually detonating at the end of their life. They are just firing and disappearing. So something worth noting, apparently they are meant to explode. We can definitely confirm that happens with the rockets, but not the missiles. going back to the actual projectile and how it operates, it is completely changed. Previously, what you could do is you could right click, turn, and fire, and it would head in the direction of where you're firing. I'll throw up some footage. This was actually going to be in one of my tips and tricks videos, but now they've changed it, you buggers. But you'd be able to do drive-bys. Keep your vehicle in one orientation and then completely bombard on either side of your flanks. So you could almost pretend you're flying past someone and then completely nuke them. But with this change, they are limiting the range that the assault scout to a much smaller area you can target while you're facing forward. So it sort of looks like that is going to be the limits of how far you can shoot out, and about the same on the other side. So no longer are they going to go wherever we point them. It is a big change in my mind. Same for going up. It's very limited on where we can aim now. So it will mean much more of a direct assault when you are in combat. The missiles feel much faster and they do look really, really cool. I prefer the old noise. As we've gone through the last video, we saw that they changed the sound of them and the explosions. But to give you an idea of how hard it's going to be to hit targets on the ground now, unless you're dive bombing, here is the guy on the ground. If we try hit him, it's not going to go anywhere near him. So the only way we can sort of do it is the old way, is the normal way of dive bombing, but it does make aggroing someone on the ground much harder. And what if we just do a small little test on a moving object? Well, it feels like we are going to have some cool changes to combat. So let me know what you think about some of these changes around how the rockets are performing. I think the only thing left that needs a lot of work is how it actually translates on the other person's view, because it's still very different. Now, this is another significant change to how combat will work in the deep desert, is when someone performs a lock-on with any of the lock-on missile launchers, you will get this little message pop up saying missile locked on. It's only a beep and then a little message. It would almost be cool to have like a little beep beep noise, particularly as the rocket got closer maybe. But as soon as they disengage the lock-on, notification will drop. If you get out of range, you'll also see the notification go away, as it is a little bit of a nerf to the Ancient Way. Another big change that they've made to the Ancient Way, which is another nerf, is when you're reloading, you won't be able to lock on. So you'll be able to lock on, fire, and then as you reload, you're very vulnerable, particularly to an ornithopter. And then you'll have to pop it back up and go through the whole animation of relocking and targeting again, giving the ornithopter a much better chance to get out of range before getting 2 rockets off. And finally, we get this very handy quality of life feature where we can just simply double click on the rockets. It goes to the vehicle ammunition socket. If we double click it, it goes back into our inventory. Really nice to see this. Unfortunately, when you detach them, they still just disappear. They don't drop to the ground. I hope they fix that one day. But a very nice change. Now we can quickly add and drop them into their slot. Part of this change as well was the ornithopter rockets will be more accurate. We can definitely attest to that, at least for things being straight in front of you. They've also mentioned that the ornithopter tail and flare was updated to look better and give better feedback. So I'm not 100% certain how that sort of translates to the game. Maybe it's just a little bit more receptive to movement, but I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think about this one. Hard to test or understand exactly. Now, this change is pretty significant, as it will also help detect cheaters or hackers, I hope. But now when you're in the prescient state, when you're spiced up, we'll be able to see the stamina bar of our enemies. So being able to see the stamina is going to have pretty profound effects on combat, as now you're going to be able to time the kill, know when to charge in, know when to retreat, monitor your stamina at the same time you can monitor theirs. It really does add a lot more meaning to being spiced up on top of everything else that it does. This is a very significant change, but I'm very curious to see what people think of how this will work in combat. Is it good? Is it a bad change? Let me know. They've come back and reworked some of the spawning when you die. So in the PvP locations, your timer will always use the PvP rules, regardless of where you select. So if you die and you want to go back to the PvE zone in Deep Desert where your base is or whatever, and you want to spawn there, well, the respawn timer will be applied as if you're in a PvP zone. However, if you're in a PvE zone and you die, the timer will use whatever rule applies to that zone. So it works differently between the PvE zone in Hagar Basin and Deep Desert PvE zone. Obviously, the Deep Desert has a longer respawn time. Sprint attacks should now be easier to aim towards intended targets when they're surrounded by a bunch of others. This is really nice. It sort of helps with that soft lock. So when you're charging into a group of people, you're going to try do damage to one specific dude or NPC. A lot of the time you can clip or hook onto someone else or soft locked onto an NPC. Now we can more than likely hit the target we're trying to when doing sprint attacks. So it should be much easier now to ping another character. It will actually follow them and trace them. So that will be very handy when you're in combat. Nice little change there. They've updated the targeting for the Bindu Nerve Strike. I believe what they're talking about is the Prana Bindu Strike. This should hopefully perform better, making it easier to lock on to a target, whether amongst a group or just in general. There's now a little nifty visual effect when you dash out of an ability. So normally when you dash, you just get the wind sort of animation passing by you. But if you do it outside an ability, you now get this cool little animation for a split second, almost like an outline of your body. I'm going to read this next one out and then break it down because it doesn't make a lot of sense otherwise. So reading the patch note, under the combat section, reduce the time it takes for NPCs to build up bonus accuracy against their target in line of sight from 15 seconds across the board to, based on their tier, 7.5 at tier 1 and scaling linearly to 2.5 at tier 6. This bonus only comes into effect after the initial peekaboo moles. You probably read that and go, what the hell? So let's just break this down. So this change affects how NPC accuracy scales and will directly impact fights against higher tier enemies, at least much more noticeably, what it was before. So the old system, every NPC, regardless of their tier, took 15 seconds of continuous line of sight fire before gaining their bonus accuracy buff, meaning they can hit you more precisely after 15 seconds. Once they locked onto you, if you stayed in sight after 15 seconds, they became significantly more accurate, aka more deadly. This was uniformed across all NPCs from the lower tier scavengers to the elite. There was no difference. 15 seconds of continuous line of sight for them to increase their deadly lethality with accuracy, hence dealing more damage. What it means now, it means there's now going to be a progressive scale. So tier 1, 7.5 seconds, down from 15, which is a big change in itself. Tier 2, probably 6.5. And then that scales all the way to tier 6, which have only 2.5 seconds before they start spitting bullets downrange with increased accuracy. So this will definitely make it harder. And from my testing in the Deep Desert, it is definitely very noticeable. But this is an excellent change to increase the difficulty against NPCs. And what this will change in combat, at least for me, is you're really going to have to duck and cover to reset this bonus accuracy scaling, because if you don't break that line of sight, you will be a much easier target. So the main takeaway is mobility will be key. Breaking line of sight, very frequent, will help mitigate this new increased danger to NPCs' lethality. Some of the big changes for the Deep Desert, we've already covered the shield wall change. They've added some new story content location that's tied to the main quest, located in Aero. I won't give any more spoilers in that. One of the biggest changes for me personally for this whole September the 10th update DLC is they're creating new Deep Desert layouts, and they've massively increased the rock island density in them. As you can see, there's a lot more just all over the place. So there's less likely to be complete sectors where it's just desert. And more importantly, the new distribution of loot. So they've finally gone and added, I think for the most part, at least a handful more of the schematics that haven't been obtainable. For instance, in the Landsrad, we have a brand new weapon for the first time, the Way of the Misery. Mizar, however you pronounce it. But this is a brand new tier 6 weapon. It's the Mauler pistol. I'll try and lock it and we can take a look at it. But this is going to be a big driver for getting people back into the Deep Desert. And we need tons more uniques for every part of the components of vehicles. We just need so much more of them to make it more and more interesting. Some of the other things they've mentioned is that they've added new visuals for parts of the Deep Desert, Shield Wall, which ties into the story content, nothing too big there. They've improved the performance, gameplay, and visuals of the caves in the Deep Desert. So for instance, here is a cave in the Deep Desert. I'm not too sure, I can't really tell too much of the difference. I think the light is a little bit more contained to where the light sources are perhaps. It is quite dark. I have noticed that in general, the Deep Desert and the coloring, I'm not sure if they've changed the gamma or if it's just the settings I have on the PTC, but it feels and looks a little bit different. So do note there have been some changes to the caves and how the atmosphere and how it looks, but this is what you can expect. Another big change that will require you to use respawn beacons even more is that they're removing checkpoint zones within the testing station. So no longer will you be able to respawn at the testing stations. So you're going to have to set a respawn beacon. This is really important because this will catch you off guard. You can no longer just throw yourself continually over and over and over again at someone. You'll have to be prepared. You'll have to have some kind of respawn, either a vehicle or a beacon, to be able to get back quickly. This one I couldn't really verify, but the spice field generation has been adjusted to allow for smoother resource gathering. For spice field generation adjusted to allow for smoother resource generation within the deep desert. I couldn't really verify this, but my understanding is that there will be more spice, or at least more frequent explosions. It's a bit hard to decipher what they actually mean with this one. But for my testing, I couldn't really notice or feel any difference, other than just spice being everywhere because no one's on the server. I don't really know why they made this change, but it's only now possible to purchase from Landsrad reward vendors if you switch to the faction before the term started. So this excludes your first time peaking a faction. You will still get access to the Landsrad. This is very specific. This is only when you switch or betray the faction to try and get the rewards from the other side. You can only do it once, so maybe this was being botted. I'm not too sure, but something to be aware of. One of the changes is players now have more opportunity to build in the shield wall section of the deep desert. The only thing I can really understand from this is that they're allowing us to build all the way up the shield wall now. So we can go all the way up. It doesn't seem like there's anything blocking us now. I believe before we weren't able to build way up on the shield wall. Something to consider. At least this is my understanding of this change. Now they've reworked a lot of the UI. It is improving more and more. So for instance, they've added the source drop down little button here too. Clearly displays all the vehicles except for it's bugged at the moment. Should have 2 assault ornithopters here. Next, what would be cool is just to have a hotkey. So we can press it and it's automatically going to drop the menu, and then maybe even hotkeys for the various vehicles. But hey, maybe that's just me. It'd be nice to have. You can also note that the circuits have unique icons. So as a better example, if we go over to a production building, fill it up with some junk, set up a container. So we want what's going into the container. Let's put that to circuit 3. So that's the input, output. Let's craft a silicon block, ensuring that the storage is going out to circuit 3. And then if we go back to the container, we can see that it's gone to circuit 3 output. Just a small change that gives a better indication of the output and input. So it's pulling resources from circuit 1, outputting it to circuit 3. Nice clean UI now, makes it easier to understand for newcomers. One thing you'll notice very quickly is a lot of the UI has changed quite substantially. We now have all the shortcut keys above the various menus for easy identification. The skills and intel have now been revamped. So just these little icons here. So for example, if we go to map, you'll notice these little UI indicators for skill and research just are slightly different. I haven't checked this in a while, but the legend has been updated with nearly all the available various icons, hazards, NPCs that will come across, including even the Treadwheel icon, which will appear like this on our maps now. We will come back to test. Apparently they have fixed the party member icons disappearing, as well as some of the changes around permissions, just giving a visual indicator of the level of access to help clarify. Not so certain on how much that actually helps, but there you have it. You'll also note that your map marking icon has changed. That is also reflected and much easier to see on your compass, as well as now we have the vehicle respawn icon clearly displayed. That is particularly helpful. Now it'll be much easier to find our vehicles if we ever get kicked out of them or lose them, and we'll know where our respawn point is. You'll notice some other cool things like when you go talk to a vendor, some of the camera angles have changed. The new functionality to change your tracked missions on the fly even accounts for when there's multiple missions layered on top of each other. You just need to press T again. So you hit T to track the first one. If that's not the one you're after, you hit T to track the next. And it has been super helpful, just being able to open map and go boom, track. Really nice. Great new functionality to make flying through the missions faster and more efficient. And just while we're talking about some of the customizations, we've got this very new handy little menu down the bottom here, which will allow us to flick through the various different pieces of our armor instead of having to muck around and click and go to different locations all the time. This is much better. Very good to see this kind of functionality, making it much easier to customize and change all our various armor pieces. There's further improvement to the marketplace UI, particularly when you're selling an item. You can see the new UI here. Now it will display a picture of the icon as well as the price per unit, which is still quite buggy, where I don't know if you've experienced, but you can't add extra zeros. Sometimes you have to cancel, hit sell again, and then sometimes it'll pick it up. So still some little bugs around. It also just increases the listing price and exchange fees, make it a little bit more compact and perhaps easier to read. I think this still could be improved, but it's a good step in the right direction. This change is a bit strange to me, but when you relist stackable items in the exchange, we can no longer edit the quantity. So for instance, this granite, we relist it. All we can edit is the price per unit, the price total, the days, but we can't edit the amount we want to sell. So to get around this, you'll have to try take the item to your vehicle or to your person, and then you can relist them and edit the quantity. At the water seller, now when we go to buy a sip, there is an actual limit in place now, whereas before you could buy almost infinite amount. So what they've done is they've added a maximum purchase limit per transactions to items that don't occupy inventory space, such as cups of water. I can't really think of another one. Let me know if there's something else like this, like a cup of water. Side note, I really don't understand why we can even buy a cup of water when every time you come into these areas, you're completely 100% on hydration. Never understood that. It makes sense if we could buy water and it would fill up our container. They've also reworked the UI for when you die. Now, they make it very clear and easier to understand which zone you're in, the PvE zone, so Hager Basin. The respawns can be still very useless, particularly if you've pocketed your ornithopter or vehicle and still lead you to just spawn somewhere very far out from where you were before. But the UI is much easier to understand at least, and it is a good improvement. If you want to compare armor, you have the armor in your inventory and you can go left control and then hover over another armor. You'll notice that there is no tick on either of these armors. However, when we go and hover it over the armor we currently have equipped, there is now a tick clearly identifying which one we currently have equipped, just to make it a little bit easier to understand which armor we're looking at, because sometimes some of the armors look very similar, so it does get confusing about which one you're comparing to. But thanks very much for watching. If you did get anything out of this, consider liking and subscribing. It goes a really long way. Hopefully this was helpful. Spent a lot of time just getting this bit more collected than just reading some shit out. So I hope you appreciate it. Thanks very much. Peace.